Hello and welcome back to another video. Today I'm in Onomichi and I'm just about to catch a ferry. And my destination, well, take a guess. I'll wait. No? Well, actually, it's Mont Saint-Michel. Yes, you heard it right, Mont Saint-Michel. In Onomichi there is a Mont Saint-Michel. So, let's get on the ferry and go and see what it's like. Okay, so I'm on the ferry, and actually it's rather a good ferry. I'm going to sit outside because it's, as you can see, a gorgeous day. It really does feel like early summer, in fact. Actually, though, I could sit wherever I wanted to because at the minute I'm the only person on the ferry. So, just while we're waiting for the ship to leave Onomichi port, this is the view down the Onomichi Suido, which is the channel linking, well, separating the mainland from Mukaishima, which is the island to the right of the picture. So we're going to sail back down this channel once we leave the ferry port. By the way, the name of this ship, and it really is quite an impressive little ship, is New Bingo, which is not really the name of a party game, but this area, the area around Onomichi and Fukuyama, traditionally is referred to as the bingo area. The other ship that normally operates this route is Momokaze. Alright, we're just leaving Onomichi port, and as I say, we're going to sail first of all down the Onomichi Suido. By the way, as far as I know, I am the only person on the ferry. I suppose in a way though that shouldn't really surprise me too much, because I've taken this service a few times before, heading to Momoshima, and those times too there's only been me and one other person on the ferry. So it's safe to say it's not a very well used service, which is unfortunate really. Let's just take a look back down the Onomichi Suido from the back of the ferry. It really is a glorious day today. I think it's the closest to summer it's felt all of this year. Alright, back to the front of the ship, which I think is where the better views are at the minute, especially because in maybe 2 or 3 minutes we're going to be passing under the Onomichi Bridge, which is in a way a highlight of this journey. It really is unfortunate that so few people seem to use this service. Maybe I'm just on the ferry at a bad time and it is really very well used, but I somehow don't think so. I think it's especially unfortunate because the ship is actually a very nice ship. It's obviously been either recently built or recently refurbished. I think it's also unfortunate because the views from the ferry are really quite wonderful. I mean, the trip just now, this part of the trip down the Onomichi Suido, with the city on one side and the island of Mukaishima on the other, first of all is worth seeing, and unless you take a ferry trip you don't really see that. But then once we get out under the Onomichi Bridge and out into more open water, those views are pretty impressive too. So I think even if you're not really going anywhere, taking a ferry like this just for a pleasure trip, for want of a better word, is well worth a couple of hours. And I think it's a real shame that more people don't take that opportunity. So we're just about to pass under the 2 Onomichi bridges, and after this once the ferry gets into open water, it will increase its speed quite significantly. In fact, it already is doing. Being on this ferry really does feel almost like being on a yacht somehow. I really do like it. I think as the ferry picks up more and more speed, the wind noise out here is going to become almost intolerable. So what I'll do is I will turn the sound right down for a little while. The first stop for this ferry is Tozaki port, which we're just coming up to now. From Tozaki there's also a little ferry that joins the two sides of this strait. And the ferry runs on demand, so basically all you have to do is turn up at the ferry port, press a little button and call the ferry, and it will come over if it's at the other side of the strait. In fact, that's the little ferry there now. And that is Uta Port on the other side of the strait. It's only about 200 meters or so. Okay, onwards. Okay, we're just arriving at Michigoe Port, which is where I need to get off. This ship is Momokaze, the other ship on the route I've just taken. So that's now heading back to Onomichi. I really like that ferry, so hopefully when I'm heading back home, I can take that. Although I have to say, New Bingo, which I just got off, that was exhilarating. Okay, so this is Michigoe Port, and like most little ports in the inland sea, it looks like quite a nice place. But I can't stop here, because from here it's about a 2-kilometer walk to where I want to go. So let's start walking. So from the port, it's a nice easy walk along the coast to where I need to go. And on the way, there's something that might be just a little bit interesting. So I'm going to drop by that and take a little look. Okay, this is the first thing I wanted to see. This is actually Itsukushima Shrine. Now, when you say Itsukushima Shrine, you think of Miyajima, and of course the most famous Itsukushima Shrine is in Miyajima. But I'm pretty sure this is some sort of branch shrine of Itsukushima Shrine from Miyajima. Hence the shrine gate in the sea. It's basically a model. The tide is just going out. Maybe in another 30 minutes or so, you could actually walk out to the shrine gate. Although it's It's only about 2 meters in the sea now, even. And just literally across the road from the shrine gate, this is the actual shrine. I think you'll agree it's not quite as impressive as Miyajima, but it's still nice in its own right. I like these little roadside shrines. By the way, there are buses to Michigoe port from Matsunaga and from Fukuyama. However, especially on weekends, the times are very inconvenient and the buses are very infrequent. So in the end, the ferry is a better bet. Alright, so that was Itsukushima Shrine, or the mini Itsukushima Shrine maybe. Let's go on. I've just had a slightly disturbing thought. If you think about why Mont Saint-Michel is famous, maybe you can see why it's important that the tide is out, or at least going out. And I did check before I came, and the tide table that I looked at said about 3 o'clock this afternoon should be low tide, but it looks very much to me like the tide is coming in, so we'll have to see. It may be that I've come all this way for nothing in the end. Okay, so I'm getting fairly close to where I need to go now, and the little settlement I'm in now is called Ebi, which in Japanese means prawn or shrimp. Now, because Japanese uses kanji, words can have the same pronunciation but different kanji and therefore mean different things. But in this case, the kanji are exactly correct. It really does mean prawn. So fancy living in a village called Prawn. Interesting. Okay, so this is not where I'm headed to, but there could be rather a spectacular view from the top of these steps. I have time, so let's go and see what's up here. So, all that's up at the top of the steps is a series of graves, which I couldn't really take a video of, and I wouldn't want to anyway. But still, this view is rather impressive, I think. So the tide does seem to be going out, after all, so that's good. And from here, there's rather a fine view out towards the Tsuneishi shipyard. That shipyard is actually in Fukuyama, not Onomichi. That's probably not something you needed to know, really, but there you are. This is Ebi Higashi bus stop, so East Prawn bus stop. I have a newfound respect for bus drivers after seeing this road. This is the route that the bus to the ferry port has to take. And by the way, this is the view. Alright, I can see through the trees where I'm going now, and it looks like the tide is cooperating, so that's good. Okay, so here I am. This is Urasaki town, which is a part of Onomichi city that is completely surrounded by Fukuyama city. That in itself is a little bit interesting, I suppose, but that's not why I'm here today. So I said earlier that Onomichi has Mont Saint-Michel. Well, this is it. Maybe not quite as impressive as the Mont Saint-Michel in France, but I'm sure you can see the similarities. And as you can see, the tide is far enough out that you can walk across this little ridge of sand to reach the island. The island is called Urasaki Jima, and maybe you can't see on this picture, but it's home to a small Kannon temple called Okino Kannon. Now, a Kannon is a goddess of mercy. That much I do know, but after that, well, I'm sorry, I have to say, I'm not so sure about the intricacies of Buddhism. But anyway, it looks like quite a beautiful little building, so let's see if we can get up to it. By the way, I suppose it should be obvious enough, but if you're wondering why this is known as Onomichi's Mont Saint-Michel, well, simply it's because it's a small island, and at low tide, as I'm doing now, you can walk from the mainland out to the island. Actually, it's only quite recently that this has come to be called Onomichi's Mont Saint-Michel. These rocks look quite slippery, I have to say, and I suppose that's naturally enough given that they're under the sea at high tide. So I need to be very careful. There are some steps just around here, I think. Alright, I think I've reached the steps without any problem. So let's go up and see what the little Kannon temple itself is like. Ooh, the railing here feels distinctly unsafe. The fact that the steps are so narrow is a bit dangerous too, I think. Okay, so here we are. This is where the Goddess of Mercy resides, and I'm quite pleased to see that there is a postbox in the door. This is what the little temple, or the home for the Kannon, is like. It's very simple, but it's also rather beautiful. It's very austere, but in a nice way. From up here at the Kannon temple, it's quite easy to see how the ridge of sand crosses back to the mainland. And at the minute, it doesn't look like the tide is even beginning to come in, so that's great. What's worrying me now is the fact that these steps are far too small to fit my feet on, so going down them is going to be a little bit of a trial, I would say. Let's give it a try anyway. If the video finishes here, you will know I didn't make it. Alright, so I made it down the steps safely, just about. So that was Okino Kannon, the little Kannon temple and the Goddess of Mercy statue itself on Uranosaki Island. It was very simple, and as I say, it was very austere, but it was rather charming. I'm glad I came. So, I said earlier that I can think of two reasons why this island, Urasaki Jima, is often linked to Mont Saint-Michel. And the first one is that they're both islands. The second is that you can walk out to them at low tide, but not at high tide. That's fair enough. But I can think of one more. Mont Saint-Michel, the real Mont Saint-Michel, has its abbey, the world famous abbey. This Mont Saint-Michel it's very much less famous, but it has its Kannon-do, or its Kannon temple, housing Oki no Kannon. So both the real Mont Saint-Michel and Onomichi's Mont Saint-Michel have a similarity that they both have religious buildings on them. I think that's quite a nice little similarity, actually. Okay, so that's about it for this video, I think. Did you enjoy this little visit to Mont Saint-Michel? I certainly did. It was really it was a pleasant ferry journey, it always is. It was a pleasant walk, and the island itself, it's small. You only really need 10 minutes to see it, maximum. But it's also a very pleasant little place. If you do fancy a visit to Oki no Kannon, then I think the ferry is by far the best way. There are buses, as I said, but they're very few and far between. There are a couple of other things, but maybe 3 or 4 other things that you need to bear in mind too. First of all, you really do need to time a visit for low tide. It's a little bit pointless to come and then just look at the island from the mainland. Of course, you need to be able to walk across the little spit of land. But you need to be aware that sometimes there are times when you can't cross even at low tide. I suppose if it's a high low tide, if that makes sense, then sometimes the path is still underwater. Depending on the time you come, it's also a good idea to either bring boots or be prepared to get your feet wet, or at least a little bit damp. The third thing I would say is make sure you take care on the rocks and on the steps. The rocks are very slippery. The steps are very, very small. Actually, I couldn't fit my feet on even walking down them sideways. And then the last thing I would say is be aware of the time. I think the tide does come in quite quickly. So if you're not careful, you could end up stranded or having to walk back through the sea, and obviously you would get fairly wet doing that. Even bearing these points in mind though, I still think that Mont Saint-Michel or Urasaki-jima or Oki no Kannon, whatever you want to call it, is a really good place to visit for a short afternoon trip from Onomichi or Fukuyama. Especially from Onomichi, because the ferry is much more convenient than the buses from either Fukuyama or Matsunaga. So anyway, thank you very much as ever for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this little journey and this little visit to Mont Saint-Michel, and I hope to see you again in another video very soon. But for now, from Mont Saint-Michel in Onomichi, not in France, goodbye.